I was thinking about this. You would never, ever jump into your car, fire up the GPS, and just hit drive without actually typing in a destination.
Right. I mean, that would be completely pointless.
Exactly. You'd just be burning gas, driving in literal circles, reacting to whatever random detour or traffic jam happened to pop up in front of your bumper.
Just letting the road dictate your whole journey.
Yeah. But according to this really fascinating translated essay from August 2005, written by this author named Xu Feng, that is exactly how roughly 90% of humanity navigates their entire lives.
That's a really profound analogy, honestly, even if it is a little bit unsettling. I mean, a GPS system physically requires an endpoint to calculate a route. Without it, the machine works, the wheels are turning, but the actual movement is entirely devoid of meaning.
Which perfectly sets up our mission for today's deep dive. We are jumping into Shui Feng's text, which is called Life's Most Critical Step. And we're going to explore this wildly ambitious claim he makes, which is that setting your ultimate life goal is not just some, good productivity habit. He says it's the single most critical evolutionary step you will ever take.
Yeah, and what makes this text so compelling is how it just seamlessly blends philosophy, sociology, and theology to build this argument.
Yeah.
He isn't offering standard corporate self-help advice here.
No, definitely not your typical quarterly goal-setting seminar.
Right. He's arguing for this totalizing worldview where our internal consciousness literally dictates the physical and spiritual reality we live in.
But before we get into the actual mechanics of how that supposedly works, I do need to make something very clear to you listening right now.
Wow.
This source material contains some very strong, highly specific religious and political viewpoints.
Yeah, he frequently references Jesus, the Buddha, specifically Sakyamuni, and this supreme organizing concept that he calls the greatest creator.
Right. And our mission today is absolutely not to take sides or to endorse any of these theological hierarchies. We're not doing that. We are just here as your impartial guides, basically unpacking the architecture of this really intense worldview. We just want to see what universal insights we can extract from his framework, regardless of your personal beliefs.
Exactly. The analytical value here is purely in the thought exercise. By examining a perspective that really challenges our baseline assumptions about reality, we can better understand the invisible frameworks that govern our own daily choices.
So let's get into it. The foundational premise of this whole essay revolves around this deceptively simple question. What kind of person would you like to become? But the stakes he attaches to this, they are absolute. According to him, failing to answer this reduces your entire existence to a tragedy.
Yeah, he says your life is fundamentally in vain. And he grounds this in a deeply metaphysical, almost thermodynamic concept of the soul.
How so?
Well, he argues that a person's current reality is strictly the materialized result of their past consciousness.
So no external factors at all.
Right. He says it's not about external circumstances or systemic advantages or just blind luck. It is entirely about the internal state you have deliberately cultivated over time.
Which leads to this detail from the text that just completely blew my mind. He uses this imagery from Eastern mythology to reframe the whole concept of human privilege. He claims that animals, he specifically mentions foxes and white snakes, have to actively cultivate their existence for millennia just to attain human status.
Yeah, that imagery operates as this brilliant philosophical lever. In various strands of Eastern folklore, you have these non-human entities that undergo these grueling, centuries-long ascetic practices just to achieve a human form.
Because being human is the ultimate prize in that context.
Exactly, because the human brain is viewed as the only vessel capable of achieving true enlightenment.
The implication of that is just staggering. He's framing human consciousness not as some default biological baseline, but as this precarious, hard-won peak.
It took eons of effort to get you into the seat you're sitting in right now.
Right. So to just wander aimlessly is, well, in his view, it's a cosmic squandering of resources. Okay, let's unpack this with a more modern analogy. It's like booting up a massive open world RPG
And you just refuse to pick a character class.
Yes, you refuse to pick a class, you don't accept any quests, you just wander around the starting village forever. But let me ask you this. When the author says that having, quote, a dog's consciousness makes you a dog, are we talking literal reincarnation here, or is this just a mindset thing?
It's actually both, which is what makes it so intense. He's saying if you inhabit this advanced human vessel, but maintain that dog's consciousness,
Yeah.
meaning your goals are strictly limited to just eating, sleeping, basic survival, your reality will literally collapse to match that limitation.
You essentially live an animalistic life within a human body.
Exactly. And subsequently, your next phase of existence will reflect that regression. So the destination is locked by the initial coordinate you set in your mind.
He explicitly states that whether you become a celestial being, a sage, a mortal, or just part of the laity, depends entirely on your consciousness. And we should probably define those terms real quick. We're talking about a massive spectrum of existence.
A huge spectrum, yeah. From the lady at the bottom, who are bound entirely by immediate physical desires.
Just reacting to what's right in front of them.
Right, all the way up to celestial beings, which seem to represent this state of complete self-actualization, totally unbound by the mundane frictions of time and space.
Okay, so your thoughts act as the literal blueprint for your future state of being. And to ground this, he uses this highly practical scenario with 4 hypothetical classmates. Let's just call them Peter, Alex, Jack, and John.
This is a great example. They're all the exact same age, they sit in the same classroom, they absorb the exact same lectures.
Right. Day 1, their external realities are identical, but their internal operating systems are completely different. Peter wants to be the president, Alex wants to be an artist, Jack wants to be a peasant, and John wants to be a robber.
And the author uses this to illustrate the compounding power of cognitive trajectory. In the short term, they all just look like normal kids sitting at identical desks. But their internal trajectories are set at radically different angles.
It's like the compounding interest of cognitive bias. A 1-degree shift in a flight path. It doesn't look like much when you're taking off from the runway.
Barely noticeable at first.
But 1,000 miles later, you are touching down on a completely different continent. Over decades, the distance between those 4 classmates becomes insurmountable. Like, Jack the peasant is never going to accidentally wander into the presidency.
And John the robber isn't going to accidentally paint a masterpiece. The chosen consciousness mathematically guarantees the final destination.
Right. Which naturally introduces a pretty massive systemic vulnerability. Because if the destination is entirely dependent on that initial coordinate, how do we evaluate which coordinates are actually worth setting?
Well, the author claims that over 90% of humanity lives haphazardly, failing to set any real coordinate at all. He says only a tiny fraction are, quote, sensible enough to master the Tao.
And he uses Tao here to basically mean the deliberate alignment of your existence with the higher universal principle, right?
Exactly. It's about conscious alignment.
So assuming you listening want to be in that sensible minority, we need to know what goals are optimal. And this brings us to what is easily the most controversial and fascinating section of the text, Schwefing's strict hierarchy of living. He literally ranks the value of human purpose.
He constructs this very rigid, almost inverted pyramid of value. At the very bottom tier, you have living purely for yourself.
Right.
He states unequivocally that a person operating on this frequency has no real value. They basically act as a biological parasite, consuming resources and inevitably bringing pain to others because they prioritize their own survival above absolutely everything else.
And, selfishness being ranked at the bottom, that tracks with almost every moral philosophy in human history. We can all agree on that. But the next tier up is where he radically departs from conventional societal norms. He argues that living for your family, focusing your energy on providing for your children and glorifying your ancestors is also a low-tier existence that brings very little benefit to society at large.
Yeah, he really pushes the envelope there. And he goes even further. The tier directly above family is serving your nation, your religion, your political party, or your specific socioeconomic class.
And he claims that dedicating your life to these institutions is actively destructive. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back on this logic. It subverts the entire foundation of human civilization.
It absolutely challenges the foundation of civic duty.
We build massive marble monuments to people who dedicate their lives to their nation. We laud parents who sacrifice their own dreams for their kids as the ultimate heroes. Society constantly reinforces the idea that serving your country or your family is the absolute pinnacle of honor.
It's true. But to understand his logic, we have to look at the sociological mechanisms of resource allocation and tribalism. The author's core thesis here revolves entirely around universality.
Universality, okay, how so?
Well, any goal that creates an us versus them dynamic. So my family versus your family, my country versus your country, he argues that's fundamentally flawed. He labels these pursuits as heterodoxy, or the small way.
Oh, because when you prioritize your family, you're implicitly deciding that other families matter less. You're drawing a boundary line in the sand.
Precisely. If your ultimate goal is the enrichment of your specific nation or your specific religion, you are inherently required to protect your in-group at the direct expense of the out-group. You're artificially hoarding resources, whether they're economic, emotional, or spiritual, behind a walled garden.
Right.
And in the author's view, this in-group, out-group bias is the literal root cause of all chaos, hatred, and war throughout human history.
Okay, wow. So by process of elimination, if tribalism, nationalism, and even familial devotion are disqualified because they create that us versus them reality, the only entity left to serve is the entire human race.
That is the apex of his hierarchy. The highest tier of existence is dedicating your life to benefiting all of mankind. It requires a love that permeates across all artificial human borders.
And this is where he points to Jesus and Sakyamuni, the Buddha, as the ultimate historical archetypes of this universal love.
Yeah. And he makes an astonishingly bold claim regarding them. He states that if you aggregated the accumulated wisdom of all humanity across all of history, it would not surpass the combined wisdom of Jesus and the Buddha.
That is a massive statement.
It is. He asserts that anyone who deviates from their specific model of universal love, whether they're a famous psychic, the head of a massive religious organization, a guru with millions of followers, he says they are fundamentally walking the wrong path.
So true spiritual alignment requires a person to make their thoughts resonate directly with those two archetypes. And by achieving that resonance, you draw closer to the greatest creator.
Yes, and it's important to note, in the context of this essay, the greatest creator isn't framed as, like, a localized deity sitting on a cloud somewhere.
Right, it's more conceptual.
It's framed as the ultimate unified field of consciousness. It's a fascinating synthesis, really. He's stripping Jesus and Buddha of their traditional roles as founders of competing dogmas.
Yeah.
And he's repositioning them as the two perfect historical manifestations of this unified field.
It is just a breathtakingly ambitious framework. So aiming for universal good is the highest possible coordinate you can plug into your GPS. But setting the theology aside for a second, a glaring mechanical question remains here.
Which is?
How does merely setting this macroscopic goal actually alter a person's day-to-day reality? I mean, just wishing to benefit mankind from your couch doesn't magically feed a hungry person or build a hospital, right?
Right, and the author anticipates this. He provides a deeply psychological mechanism for how the internal state actually manifests the external reality.
Correct.
He introduces the concept of the perceptual filter.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, once a goal is firmly set, your brain begins radically selecting for relevant information. He quotes the historical Chinese figure Su Xiaomei here, noting, quote, "The benevolent see benevolence, and the wise see wisdom."
Which actually maps perfectly onto modern neuroscience. I mean, the human brain is bombarded with millions of bits of sensory information every single second, but our conscious mind can only process a tiny fraction of that, maybe 40 or 50 bits.
It's an incredibly small amount.
Yeah, and to prevent us from just going completely insane, the brain uses a filter, it's called the reticular activating system, to block out absolutely everything except what it deems immediately relevant to our survival or our goals.
And the author illustrates this neurobiological truth with these rapid-fire sociological examples. He notes that a true capitalist looks out at a bustling city street, and they literally only perceive profit margins, market conditions, and consumer demographics.
Whereas an artist walks down that exact same street.
And their brain filters the environment into a world of colors, architectural lines, and light structures.
Right, or a sports fan opens a newspaper and their eyes just instantly bypass the geopolitical headlines to lock onto the box scores. They are all inhabiting the exact same physical geography, but they're living in completely different realities based on the key words they've programmed into their biological search engine.
He pushes the contrast to the absolute extreme, too. He points out that beggars process the world fundamentally differently than millionaires. Mages think differently than pastors.
And the starkest contrast in the text, the visual filter of a man out looking for a hooker versus a saintly priest walking down the exact same block.
Right. Their respective goals dictate entirely different sensory inputs, essentially creating parallel universes that occupy the same physical space.
So what does this all mean for you listening? It's basically the analog version of how digital algorithms work today, or the red car syndrome. Like when you decide to buy a red car and suddenly you see red cars at every single stoplight, did the rest of the world stop existing? No. You just told your algorithm what to fetch.
Exactly. So Effing is arguing that your consciousness is the master algorithm of your physical reality. And he scales this law of attraction all the way up to his highest spiritual claims.
Right, so if your goal is to build a skyscraper, you will inevitably start seeing structural steel and concrete.
And if your goal is to become a celestial being, your algorithm will naturally begin curating information about the mysteries of time, space, and the nature of life. The chosen objective literally mandates the gathered resources.
So seek and ye shall find isn't just a poetic proverb here, it's an algorithmic certainty. But, I mean, if programming this internal search engine is as mechanical as just setting a goal, why did he claim earlier that 90% of people completely fail to do it?
Well, he identifies two primary human flaws that corrupt the system. First, we allow our algorithms to be hijacked by lower-tier temptations.
Like getting distracted by immediate physical gratification.
Exactly. You set a high goal, but then you lose focus. And second, we suffer from a weak will. We experience regret and we abandon our trajectory the very second we encounter friction.
But then he pivots from that general human weakness to this much darker psychological trap. I call it the paranoia paradox. He claims that people who constantly monitor others harbor evil intentions. And even more surprisingly, he says that people who are always afraid of being cheated are actually worthless cheaters themselves.
Yeah, that is definitely an extreme stance.
Wait, I really have to challenge this on behalf of the listener because this feels like a massive leap. If you are just being cautious with your wallet, or you're thoroughly checking reviews before buying something online to avoid getting scammed, this author is essentially saying you are a worthless cheater. That seems incredibly unfair to anyone who's just trying to survive in a complex world.
It is incredibly provocative, you're right,
Yeah.
but it actually makes perfect sense within his strict algorithmic framework. He equates paranoia and deep skepticism with a corrupted spiritual perception.
How so?
If your consciousness is constantly fixated on detecting deception, lies, and scams, even if it's strictly in the name of self-defense, you are still making deception the central focal point of your reality.
Oh, I see. You're typing the keyword scam into the search bar, so the algorithm is going to feed you a world made entirely of scams.
That is exactly the trap. Anticipating a scam requires you to intimately understand the mechanics of cheating, which places your consciousness on the exact same vibrational frequency as the cheater. He's arguing that a truly elevated consciousness, someone deeply focused on the greatest creator and universal love, simply wouldn't tune their receiver to that frequency of suspicion.
Right, because if tribalism creates an us versus them reality, paranoia creates a me versus everyone reality, and both of those isolate you from the universal field.
Exactly. Which leads to his final, and perhaps most controversial, warning about the nature of intellect itself.
The hyper-rationality part.
Yes, he states that individuals who delude themselves with physical phenomena, who are extremely rational and obsess over empirical reality, will blind themselves to the greatest creator. He goes so far as to definitively declare that atheists can never become celestial beings.
It is such an airtight, self-sealing philosophy. He builds this towering, absolute structure of the universe where every stray thought is weighed. Atheists are locked out of higher realities because they demand empirical proof before they believe. But his system requires belief, the internal algorithm, to actually generate the empirical proof. Hyper-rationality breaks the manifestation engine.
The stakes he presents are absolute. Life and death, heaven and earth, all hinging on the precise calibration of your own mind.
Which is exactly what makes the conclusion of this essay so incredibly jarring. I mean, after delivering this heavy, universe-altering philosophical treatise, Shuifeng signs off in the most abrupt, almost comical way imaginable.
Yeah, he essentially kicks over his own sandcastle.
He literally writes, quote, "The lost are lost, and the awakened are awake."
And then follows it up with, "Hey, I have said more than enough. Shuifeng just loves to talk nonsense."
It's this stunning moment of ego death. It reminds me of those Zen koans where the master builds up this massive intellectual edifice only to just slap the student with a stick to break their reliance on words. He's basically saying, take it or leave it, I'm just a guy talking.
By detaching himself as the ultimate authority, he forces the responsibility directly back onto you, the reader. Regardless of whether you accept his theology regarding the greatest creator or the mythological lore of foxes cultivating human lives, the underlying psychological exercise remains undeniably potent.
That is the true value of unpacking this text. The deliberate act of intentionally choosing what kind of person you want to become dictates the algorithmic filter of your brain. And if you do not actively program that filter, society will happily program it for you.
And usually the default societal filter is whatever is loudest, most divisive, or most fear-inducing on any given day. You're either the architect of your consciousness or you are a victim of someone else's architecture.
You have to input the destination yourself. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over today as we wrap up. We have explored how intensely cultivated consciousness shapes personal reality. But what happens when two people with diametrically opposed, heavily programmed algorithms are forced to build a life or a society together?
That is the million-dollar question.
Think about it. The hyper-focused artist who only perceives color and form, and the hyper-focused capitalist who only perceives profit and efficiency. If they are sitting across from each other at the exact same table, trying to design a city, does one reality eventually override the other? Or do they remain trapped in completely separate universes, forever speaking different languages while sharing the exact same physical space?
That tension really is the ultimate defining question of human collaboration.
Keep questioning the keywords you are feeding your own reality filter. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Plug in a good destination today.